Welcome, everybody, to the Ogden Way Podcast. I'm Ogden City Mayor Ben Nadolski, and I'm happy to have you here to talk about the stories of Ogden through the lens of our people. And there are two really special people here with us today. We got Ronnie White and Luis Lopez, two good friends of mine, two big-time champions and lifters and leaders in our community. Thanks for being here, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mayor.
So if you don't know, Ronnie White is son of legendary name Marshall White, Detective White, Officer White, Dr. White,
Yeah.
right? A man who served our community for years and is legendary in his contributions and his impact, who lost his life in the line of duty in service to kids, a particular kid even in that case, trying to help a kid, lost his life. And Ronnie's the living, breathing embodiment of that man, and someone that we've worked really closely with on rebuilding our Marshall White Community Recreation Center.
Yep.
Right?
That's right. Thank you so much.
Yep. And Luis Lopez, former council member, local leader, local legend in his own mind, but a really good friend of mine. Luis, thanks for being here. Actually, you came here. We invited Ron to be a guest, and he said, I'd love to participate, but I'd like to have Luis on the show with us.
Yep. You guys were so instrumental in getting the Marshall White Center back on track, I'll say. We started out with a committee and got a little off track, but thanks to you guys, got it turned around.
That's right. And we'll get to all that here in the show, but let's start with let's talk about your dad first, because that's he's the giant in the room, right?
Yep. He's a legend.
Marshall N. White, Dr. White, Detective White, Officer White. Tell us about your father.
Where to begin? I guess I'll begin when he came to Utah. He was in the military and needed a place to unwind, and Ogden was the closest place that patronized people of color. And so he came and developed a relationship with Joe McQueen, who was playing a musician here in Ogden, and played on 25th Street. And my father became familiar with 25th Street. He was assigned to a station in Kearns and had to come to Ogden for entertainment, and that's how my father first came to know Ogden.
It's hard to think about two more influential leaders in the history of our city than Marshall White and Joe McQueen. And then the fact that those two were buddies and worked together. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I was able to see Joe play before he passed away, and he told me a lot about my father, and that's basically how I really got to know who my father was through Joe McQueen.
Well, I'm sure you got the real deal, didn't you?
Yeah, kind of like you two are buddies now, you know.
Yeah. We're not kidding ourselves thinking that we're Joe McQueen and Marshall White, though, in terms of our impact.
You know,
we hope to make an impact, but
you're legends in your own time.
Yeah, no kidding. So your father was really, really involved and passionate about youth, the kids.
Yes.
Being a police officer back then was totally different than it is right now, right?
We're going back, you know. Things are turning around. Youth were incorrigible, or, you know, they were in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, a lot of black youth were being incarcerated. So my father thought he could make a difference and maybe help try and turn that around. So he did what he could with the help of the Ogden City Police Department in trying to stem that juvenile delinquency and those kinds of things. And they opened up a little recreation area.
Mm-hmm.
in between 26th and 27th and Wall. And
Yep. So we had Shane Kais on the show. You know Shane.
yes,
We talked about him a little bit beforehand, but he talked a lot about what he learned researching your father's story and sharing it in the 2-part series on Junction City Podcast, Junction City Justice Podcast. And the way he explains it, and Joe shared some of this too, is he was a really big time presence. You know, he was a really fit and striking man of size and strength, but his strength was also inside, and that he carried a presence about him, an aura, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people really respected him when he walked in the room,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I can only imagine that he brought that aura to bear when it came to serving kids, right?
Yes.
And so when he said, we need to do this, people must have listened because things happened, right?
Definitely. There was a police sergeant, Nissenbaum. I can't say his name correctly because I've only read it in the papers, and I never got to meet him personally. But even the young man that shot my father, he didn't want him to go to jail. He was a young kid, 16 years old, kind of familiar.
Yeah.
We had a 16-year-old incident recently with the fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But our young kids got into trouble, and even then, he said that young kid who had never really fired a gun before and ended up shooting my father. He didn't want him to really be persecuted because he knew that would have an impact on the rest of his life, and he was caring and really wanted our young people to take their lives seriously and not screw it up by getting involved in crime at a young age.
Right. And so he wanted our youth to take their lives seriously, and he identified recreation as an outlet and an opportunity, right?
Yes.
And so they set up kind of early recreation opportunities on Wall Avenue. What were they using? Storage containers even for, is that what I remember?
Old barricades from military barricades.
Okay, right? Just finding what they could to make things happen as best they could with what they had.
Exactly.
Right?
You know, and that was the way I think Ogden is they take what they have and they make the best of it, and even when things were against them, they found a way to make things happen.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big time element of the Ogden Way. We have grit and perseverance. We have a ton of self-determination, and it's not just about me individually, it's about us and making sure that we invest in ourselves while we lift those around us, right?
Exactly.
And so if you fast forward through all those years of your father and the life and the history and the legacy of being a podiatrist and being an officer and a detective, and he answered the call when that young boy was troubled, and his full intent was to go there and help that kid. And that kid shot your father in the stomach and ultimately took his life, but it never took away his legacy for helping kids, right?
No.
And so eventually the recreation center in our community was named for your father, the Marshall White Center.
Yep.
And that's where we bring our journeys together, is in our tenure when we were on the city council together. We served 2 terms for 8 years together on the council, and it was time for us to revisit the recreation center because it was getting old and dated and need to be not just refreshed, but ultimately replaced, right?
Right.
And so we are really excited that we'll be opening the new Marshall White Center on the first week of May this year. It is on track.
It's
still
on track. Okay.
Yep.
Good to hear.
And so that's where Luis comes into your life.
Yes.
He's been a thorn ever since, right? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
He's been great.
I'm just kidding.
you know, he's been great. Meeting with you guys the first time, we had a little incident. The committee had got together, spent a lot of time, worked hard on putting together programs for the Marshall White Center and plans and what we were going to do, and having contractors look at it and tell us whether we needed to just do a fix-up on the Marshall White Center or total rebuild or what could be done. And Bart happened to be the committee chair at the time. Bart, is it Bart?
Oh, for the council at the time?
City council, who was the
Council member Blair? Bart Blair?
Maybe.
Blair. And he kind of wrote us a letter and pushed just to the side and said, no, we got a plan. And again, it was kind of the mayor's plan.
I remember that letter. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that letter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was when everybody just sort of got really frustrated, and it was like a time where everybody wanted to help and we wanted to do something, but we weren't figuring it out, were we?
Well,
we weren't figuring it out.
I think the mayor had a plan in his head, or maybe you guys had all had a plan together because of who was it? Who did we have involved with that? I think it was.
Well, we had a whole committee. We had an advisory committee that was coming up with options.
But you guys had traveled to Boise, Idaho,
right? YMCA
and
had been informing things.
Yeah, so I think it was.
So it was hard because
YMCA.
We had all these ideas and all this information, but we weren't all on the same page at all.
No.
And so that letter was just sort of this time where it highlighted that we weren't all on the same page, and we needed to kind of put our foot down, put a stop, and just say, let's go. You know what I mean? We got to do this and do it together. Yeah. We got to make a decision and let's go.
Yeah. And
that was when we had lunch at Chila's, is what Ronnie was reminding me before we started.
That was when I first met you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys said, hey, we said, I ran on the Marshall White, so I'm behind you 100%. And I just puffed up and got excited and okay, let's go.
Yeah.
And you sounded in and said, yeah, I'm behind Marshall White. We all want to do something with Marshall White, but we were going back over old, old habits of trying to move it from a different location. The location
that's right
was a problem for some people, and I understand why, because down there in the ghetto, the black folks felt they had something, so they wanted to, protect their what they had. They didn't want to lose it. But the original reason that it was built there was not just because it was for the black people and having something to hold on to, but it was where he worked and lived.
Right. That was his neighborhood.
That was
his block.
He was assigned to the black folks in the neighborhood and patrolled it. So when he was shot, there was a weird thing that went through the black neighborhood, that police officers had shot my father because there were the two officers that usually he patrolled with weren't there. So the suspicions naturally came about. So I had to kind of figure this stuff out as I'm growing up. Why did everybody think that police officers had shot my father, including members of my family?
So is it because your father ran by himself to try and help that kid?
Yeah, he wasn't thinking about.
Normally, he would be there with others. So there was this presumption.
Yep.
Interesting.
So
Well, let's get back.
Circumstances.
Let's get back to that history of that location because, certainly he was a leader and a servant, especially in the black community. But that neighborhood is where he lived, right?
Definitely. We lived on 28 in Wall.
Yep.
A few blocks away.
And so if there was any discussion about moving it, that was not taken kindly. And so we had to settle the question around location first and foremost.
Yeah.
Because that was getting in the way of how do we figure out what to build has a lot to do with the location. And so we had to put that question to rest early on.
Yeah.
And I was telling you, it was that Junction City Justice podcast by Shane Kais, now one of our lieutenants in the department, that talks about the history of our department. After hearing that, I recognized the significance of the location and of the man. And it's like, okay, there is no choice. This is the spot. And once we got past that, right?
Yeah.
Things were a little bit easier.
But it's funny, the same argument had to be had the first time it was built because the location was. But again, that was decided at that time. That's where he worked, and that's So
we redecided again.
Redecided again, and I thought that was hilarious. I'm just going, this conversation has been had before, and it was just like deja vu.
Yeah.
But
well, I'm glad. I remember sitting at lunch with you guys, and I remember telling my wife, but I remember telling Luis, and then telling you guys at lunch. I'm like, well, this might cost us a lot of political capital. So be it. Might be the end of the road for us, but we're going to be on the right side of history. And I'm so thankful that we made the choice to keep it where it is. And I'm really excited that we're on track to open this thing in the first week of May.
And we were on the right side of history.
Correct.
Right.
Even
though there were concerns because it was probably politicized and it was difficult to navigate all the controversies or issues or perceptions or misconceptions. But, leaders have to make decisions, and then we have to live with them. And you never know what's going to happen in this environment that is so harsh. But in this case, it turned out to be really good, right? Because we're sitting here talking about a grand opening with the mayor that as a council member that was involved in making this happen, and now is the mayor, and now gets to be more directly involved now in making sure not only the project happens, but probably programming and the future and the involvement of the community and an anchoring place for our community and everything. So it just happened to be that everything turned out to be really cool.
Everything works out for a reason, right?
Right.
Now, you and I have talked about this a lot, Luis, where you build strong relationships when you do hard things together. And that was a hard time.
Yeah.
It was just hard. And we had some things we had to just break through, but we are better men and better friends because of it. And we're doing the work to make Ogden a better place because of it, right?
Yes.
Just last night, we had our chief of police join me with Mara Brown and Cindy Wheeloth at the joint school board and city council meeting that we do each year. And they had a lot of questions and wanted to hear from the chief. And I shared the story about when I interviewed for chief of police. I asked the candidates, why Ogden? But I also asked, what do you want your legacy to be as chief of police, if selected? And Chief Jake Subi said, I want my legacy to be two things. I want to look backwards, and I want to recognize the history of our department and recognize those whose shoulders we stand on. And I want to take care of the future by having a legacy of involvement with our youth. And so he is leaning all in on behalf of the department and bringing the department with him, really looking toward that opening of that center, and has programming options and ideas on how we bring our officers in more connection with the kids at the Marshall White Center, how we honor the legacy of other fallen officers who we've lost since that time in that center. He looks back at the history and says we've lost that connection as a department, and he wants to really rebuild that. So hard things, yes. Good things as a result, absolutely. More to come, no doubt about it, right?
Right.
And so I'd forgotten about that lunch until you sat down and told me. I'm like, so why did you demand that Luis be joining us? And I'm like, oh, that's right.
It feels like old home week, man.
Yeah,
it
Full
makes
circle.
me feel
Full
Yes,
circle.
exactly.
Full circle. Yeah.
And I'm comfortable with you guys, so yeah.
Well, good. We hope you are. We're
Yeah.
comfortable too and thankful. So, Luis, what do you remember about that day, and what do you reflect on looking back on the journey of where we've been?
I reflect on how when Ron, when we started talking here, mentioned that I ran on partly on the Marshall White, right? And I was sharing with you earlier that I talk a lot about how it was hard for me when my kids were very little. I have 3 kids, and my kids were 2 years old, 3 years old, 5 years old, and I didn't have money to take them to the bowling alley, to watch movies, to eat at restaurants, and so I spent a lot of time at the McDonald's playgrounds, and I spent a lot of time at the Newgate Mall, at their playground area, and I saw a lot of people from the community there, and it was primarily in the winter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in the rest of the months, the other months, we can be outside. But in the winter, it was hard, and so we almost had a community of people that we ran into each other there all the time, and I just sat there, right? And our kids were running around playing, and I just kept just thinking about the need to have more opportunities for indoor recreation, and how we basically, we have the Marshall White, and we had the Marshall White, but that was almost everything there is, right? I mean, we have some of the pools at Ben Lomond and Ogden High, and but there's very limited the service and the hours, and so I think that was probably the most touching and most important issue for me. I run on my platform. I run on 4 things: education, the Marshall White, the Union Station, and multicultural initiatives. And I think the Marshall White, because of what I just said, because I remember, and if I always say that I'm emotional, then I don't cry. So I just have to say that I'm very emotional, and then it goes away. So I had to say it. But I just remember, it's like I see all the other kids in our city through my kids, right? And so if my kids don't have these opportunities, there are thousands of kids in our city that don't have the opportunities that my kids don't have. And so my job as a leader is to figure out how to bring about those opportunities. So that's what I remember the most, and I remember being so frustrated because I was losing hope at one point, and all I said at the diet when we talked about it was, I'm like, well, I'm tired of talking about it, but here we go again. It's like, and no matter what I said, nothing happens, right? And I just kind of get angry,
I had a lot of family members that were that way. They're never going to do anything with the Marshall White Center, and it seemed that way. It was a long time where we were spinning our wheels on the Marshall White Center, and the community was getting real discouraged.
Yep, it's called political paralysis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was all around just conflict and disagreements, and it was really a hard time, and it was hard on the city. I think it took a toll on our community and our people. It set a tone that I don't think was healthy or good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful that we got through it. I'm thankful of where we ended, but I wish we had been able to do it without all of that. But if that's what it took, that's what it took, right? And so it's also sort of emblematic that there are times where people in the community just need to use their voice, make it clear as to what they want and what they demand and expect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've had this talk with friends recently that, I always want to be the kind of mayor that doesn't create the dynamic that requires that kind of activism to get our attention,
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, activism has been something that has brought some of the biggest wins in the history of our nation and in the world. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's an absolute constitutional fundamental right that anchors people and their voices and their needs, right, to those that are elected to serve. And so in this case, it's a hard time. It's unfortunate that that's what it took, but that is what it is, and we are better for it now.
Yes.
Right.
I agree.
And I also remember that, I think it's, as I reflect on everything, is I was using what I always call the power of the microphone, the power of the mic as a council member, the power of my voice, even if I didn't have the authority to do certain things, because I was one of seven always, right? One of seven votes, but I had the power of my voice to say what I felt and what I thought was right. And so I reflect on that because now we're here, so many years later, now using these mics to also speak truth and talk truth about everything that's happened. And I can tell you that even before I ran for the city council, which has now been more than 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago, and I looked at the Marshall White and indoor recreation as a mental health issue that was important in our community, and that's why it was so important to me. And then it was so hard to do anything once I got elected, and it was so frustrating. And so after everything happened, even though there were so many people involved, so many people, so many hours, so much energy expended into this issue, but I can say, at the end of the day, the mayor single-handedly is the one that made the one that was pivotal in turning things around to finally make the Marshall White a reality. Because he was the chair on the council and I was the vice chair, and I was in all those meetings, and I remember what happened. I remember how he handled the topic, and so I want to say thank you.
Of course, but I'm not going to take all that credit.
Thank you.
It was no, it's not. It wasn't just me.
It wasn't.
No. It's a change of leadership that really, when you two became chair and vice chair, it changed the whole culture of the council, and it has changed the whole culture of our community right now. So I want to thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for noticing.
And don't take the credit.
No, I don't.
I'm giving it to you,
okay,
and he's giving it to you, so you don't have to take it.
But it also, even.
Yeah, you're right.
But
you're right. You're right.
For real, I think credit needs to go where credit belongs. There are a ton of people, and this is something that Taylor Kenneth and I talked about after the election. Is him and I don't need to fight over who gets credit for what happened. Taylor absolutely provided an important role in where we are today, and he deserves credit for that. And he did it for all the same reasons I did it, because he cares, right?
Yeah. Right.
And it shouldn't ever matter around political differences or not. It's about what's right. What's right is right. Yeah. And in this case, we knew what was right. We had to honor the legacy of the man, keeping the building where it is, keeping the anchor of our city tied to the anchor of his legacy, Mm-hmm. And once we made that decision, then it was a matter of making sure that there was support amongst everybody for the plan that ended up coming to be. Because we don't have that endless wallet here, right? There's boundaries on what we're able to afford. And
my friend calls it God's credit card. We don't have God's credit card.
No, we do not. No, we do not. And so, but also the other council members all got on board too, right? And it was just a really hard time for everybody, because everyone says, well, you have the power. Well, we have the vote and we have the mic, but we had to come together as a council on something that could work for everybody so that we could get past the stalemate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so all 7 council members supported this thing, and it took all 7 council members setting aside differences and saying, okay, what's the right thing to do? And it took the community, including with Taylor and Sean and others, right? With you and your family and Betty and anybody and everybody, Marcus and the chief of police at the time. And it was everybody had to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And we ended up coming up with a beautiful plan, and we are going to unveil a beautiful project as a result, right?
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing. But if we look back and fight over who gets credit, which we're not doing, but we've got to be a community that just says it's not about politics, it's not about who gets credit, it's about the impact. And I think that we have done that. Yeah. I really believe that we have done that, and that's what the real celebration is going to be.
Yeah,
it's providing for the kids, developing the beautiful facility, but having done it as a community, right?
Yeah, I think the community learned a lot about putting aside their personal differences and looking to see what they can do to help others for the first time in a long time when looking at the Marshall White Center.
Which is a perfect segue into why you're here. Like, there's a neon sign behind you that says the Ogden Way. It's the name of the podcast. It stands for something, right? It's not just a frame. It's a framework that aligns all of us as a community and as a city, but it's also an ethos. It's a spirit. And it stands for us. It stands for being the kind of community that has the kind of people that care so deeply that we are going to do the work no matter what it takes, right? That is a level of grit and perseverance that other cities just don't have like we do. But it's about investing in ourselves, recognizing and taking accountability for who we are and our decisions and our future. But when we do that, we always look to our sides and lift others as we are rising. That's what the Ogden Way is about. It's our competitive advantage. It's who we are. It's built into our bones. It's an ethos and a spirit that drives the city forward, right? And the result of the Ogden Way is a new Marshall White Center. That's the way I view it. And if we can do everything in this city the way we did that, right? Learn from our lessons of what we could have done better, avoid the lost energy and the lost time, and get to the point where we come together for something and do something better. That's the Ogden Way. That is the best way that we can do things. And if we don't have alignment with congressional delegations, our state legislature, our county commissioners, our anchor institutions like the school district, as well as the city, all of our nonprofit friends and partners, and our friends and neighbors, fellow churchgoers, etc. If we're fighting with each other, we're not going to get anywhere, right?
Right.
And we need to be fighting for each other, not with each other. So that's why we have this podcast. That's why we have the framework, the Ogden Way. That's why we brand ourselves around it, because we want to make sure that we keep that spirit front and center. So I'm really looking forward to the first week of May when we get to unveil this center. What are you hoping to see when we get to that point? What do you envision when you think about that day?
I just see people helping each other, and I really see the old days coming back again. You know, when the center first opened, there was the Ogden Way.
Yeah.
The feelings that we have right now. That was the feelings that it brought when it first opened.
You know, and I'll say, so my wife and I coached a team of kids. I think we might be the last team to have practiced there before we demoed it to start the construction for the new one. And I remember the staff at the time telling me, they're like, there's just always been a feeling here. All those years, no matter the condition of the facility, there was always a feeling of the people inside it. And
it was sacred ground,
right?
Neutral ground. Yeah. Black, white, browns. That was a place where you don't have your differences. Indivisible was really in that building. We were all there together and one family.
Yeah. I'm sure it would have felt different if we had moved it to a new location. Might have, right?
What could have been, I don't know, but
I
know what it is a feeling of family and love and community.
I think it's been a lot of hard work to get to the point where we're building that thing, but it's going to be more hard work that we're feeling it, and then making sure that we're feeling it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Chief Subi shared a program with me. He calls it Rad Kids. And it's a program he was really interested in before becoming chief, so he had his kids sign up for it. And it's a program that connects troubled youth with police officers, and the police officers are the coaches and instructors and mentors in the program. And they teach self-confidence. They teach how to take charge and to stand up for yourself, and how to handle bullying when you see it, and how to say no for yourself, and you know what I mean, how to protect, how to see dangers before you're in a dangerous situation, etc. and it's all taught and mentored by the police officers. But Jake Suby, our new chief, really likes the idea of making sure that we have got a continuity with our school resource officers, that they're in our schools with our kids, building those relationships, right, over the course of years. But each summer there's a little bit of a dip. They lose touch with the kids. Kids go out in the summer and they do what they do. And he's proposing this and other ways to make sure that our school resource officers stay engaged with the kids through the summer, and then they pick right back up in the next school year. And through that summer, they're participating in programs and activities, and the officers are constant touch points of, mentorship and connection and support. And so I think that is the kind of thing that your dad would be really proud of, right?
Yep.
And so it's our job to make sure that you're proud of what we do, because if you're proud, we know that your dad would be proud, right?
Yeah, I'm basically his. I'm just a product of his life, basically. That's mental health is so important. You mentioned it earlier, and our youth's mental health will do nothing but rise from that kind of participation and that kind of input and that kind of community. Yeah,
that's right. So the Ogden Way has 7 pillars. Each of those pillars is a fundamental component of human success and existence, and 2 of them are healthy and active lifestyle is one, and then meaningful social connections with one another. And so the role of recreation and indoor recreation, the way you envisioned it when you ran for city council almost 10 years ago, that's an important part of our healthy and active and happy lifestyle and our mental health. And in a community center like Marshall White, it actually brings together the other pillar of meaningful social connections with each other, right?
Right.
These are the things that set apart a city from a community. Mm-hmm. And we're not after building a city, we're here to build a community. And so I'm really excited to see all the work that our staff have been doing for programming and planning for the space. They're really excited to unveil those things and start to build them,
Yeah.
And we're excited to welcome people through the doors to start to build them with us. It's going to be a special place, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's so magical how the universe does things to help us be successful and help us reach places and ideals that we want to reach as human beings. And sometimes they happen in ways that we don't imagine. And like this is kind of like that, the way I see it, which is, through the legacy of your dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
A center came about that is an anchor for kids and families and community and everything in between until this point. We're here, we get to talk to you about these things. The legacy continues, the works continue, the work continues, the community building continues, right? And all that is kind of like what you were saying earlier, Mayor. It's like, yeah, all the people that have been involved to make this happen and get to this point. And, I'm not sure how you're feeling, but I'm feeling very hopeful. I think we're living in very difficult times in our society, with a lot of polarization. It's always been there for a while. It looks like it continues to grow, but these conversations, I haven't felt like this in a while.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Right?
I know the feeling.
Right?
Right.
Yeah,
You look at the news. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into politics.
No need to get into politics, but just.
But you're right. It's a good feeling to know that you guys are here and that we're working towards something bigger than us.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
And all the, like you said, all the people that have been involved, all the shoulders that we're standing on.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's amazing.
And then we get to have boxing too.
That's right.
We'll have I knew we had boxing, but we get to make it a little bigger, a little broader, right, for our kids, and you know how important boxing is for the Black and Mexican community.
Yes.
Right. Particularly, it's just huge.
Yeah.
And I know that we have a lot of kids that don't have that support, and now there's going to be a new opportunity in this place, right? And it's all all part of this very cool energy, and that is happening to make it happen. So
I'm excited.
So we will have boxing there, and that's not the end of what we're going to be doing for boxing. In fact, Luis has been helping with some options for boxing and for kids in our community, and we're working on some stuff that we look forward to announcing eventually. It's not ready for prime time yet, but we've got some options in the works, and we want to make sure that that opportunity and those activities are available to as many kids as we can, because that's something that is in high demand for an enormous part of our community, and there's just not enough of it. But in our past, we were a boxing city.
Yeah.
We have a big time history of really successful fighters in the city. And boxing is not what a lot of people think it is. It is not teaching our most troubled youth how to fight and take it out on the streets and use it. It is the exact opposite. It is an opportunity to build camaraderie and discipline within themselves and for each other. A place to create focus and academic support. It is really a powerful tool for youth in this city, and it's something that I'm really excited to explore further, and I'm thankful to have Luis.
Let me share this with you. One of my mentors, because my father passed away, you have to have mentors that you look up to, was my brother-in-law. He played football at Weber State. His name was Mose Watkins. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was a center director at MTC, Clearfield Job Corps Center, for many, many years. But he was a boxer for Bill Lyons, Golden Glove boxer.
Know that name for sure.
Yeah. He grew up right down here in Ogden on 27th Street. So, homegrown.
Oh, yeah.
But education and boxing. Golden Gloves boxer. And then he went to Weber State. Just,
it's a darn football.
Great. So, then he went on to play professional football in Canada and come back and work for MTC. But our youth need to have those kind of mentors to look up to.
Yeah, we had, I don't know if you've seen the first episode that dropped on, the first one was an introductory episode with my wife, Janie, and I. But our first guest was Billy Schiffenhauer. He's a silver medalist bobsledder from the 2002 Winter Olympics. He's a guy that grew up in the streets of Ogden. Mm-hmm. And I got to know Billy in college. We played sports there. So my wife played volleyball and basketball. I played football, and Billy was a world-class track athlete. And he ended up becoming a bobsledder. And we interviewed him, and we talked about our initiative to find one Olympian in our community, one kid right now that's in our streets, in our house, in our schools, who can be the next Billy, who is the next Olympic athlete. And if we make that our goal, you got to do a lot of things to bring that child out of, right? And so that's an initiative that's paired with our Olympic legacy and looking forward to the next 10 years, where when we host the world, we want to have done the kinds of things in our community to create the kinds of opportunities that bring all of the kids, as many kids as possible, out of their home, their streets, and then those schools to compete and participate. And if we do that and do it well, we are going to find an Olympian in the city. And if I were a betting man, I'd say that kid's going to be a boxer, right? We're that city. And so that means we've got a lot of work to do on behalf of boxing to bring as many kids to that opportunity as possible, right? Yeah. And we're going to keep our eyes open for who that kid might be, and we're going to wrap our arms around those kids that have that potential, all while lifting as many kids as possible, right?
Right.
Do you like boxing, Ron?
I do.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do.
follow it?
I haven't followed it as much.
Don't follow it as much.
MMA's kind of taken over. And
I follow both.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Which one do you like better?
I think I like boxing better.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I really enjoy MMA. I love it. But I think boxing is really more of my sport. And my son boxes, not professionally, but he went around all kinds of gyms around Ogden in the community, and there's a kid that lives in Vegas, and he's sponsored by Mayweather, and his dad took him around different states to go sparring, and he came to spar at a gym in Roy one day, and my son almost sparred with him, and he's a professional boxer now. He's like 3 or 4-0, and I'm so glad my son didn't get to boxing.
That's where we have to make sure we've got the right parents, the right coaches, the right system in place to make sure we're pairing kids with the right opportunities and not hurting anybody.
Yep.
But that's for another day and another episode. For today, super thankful to have you guys here. Thank you, Ronnie, for everything that you've done to represent the legacy of your father, not just in the project and in your leadership, but embodying who he is and helping us to know who he was right through you. And thank you, Luis, for standing tall and having lunch at Chila's that one day. And we just made a decision, and others made decisions around with us. And here we are, first week of May. That's going to be the community celebration, right?
Right.
So we end every episode with a call to action. Okay. First, go to theogdenway.com, like, share, subscribe, listen to more podcast episodes. But mark your calendars and put a hold in it for that first week of May. That's still our target to open the facility. And the Marshall White Center is going to be a beautiful place, and we're going to need your help. Everybody who's here listening and watching, we're going to need your help filling the place, filling it with life, filling it with community. Bring your family, bring your kids. So mark your calendars. That's your call to action. Show up when we cut that ribbon, and show up every day after that to use the facility and bring life to that community center, and in so doing, bringing life to our community. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
10-4.
10-4.
10-4, Mayor.
Ronnie White, Luis Lopez, thanks for having us. That's another episode of the Ogden Way Podcast. Until next time, God bless you, Ogden.